Most people are absolutely terrified of running out of money before they die. It is the number one fear in personal finance. But almost nobody is terrified of the opposite scenario, which is actually much more common. I'm talking about running out of life before you run out of money. If you die with a massive investment portfolio and a bucket list full of things you never did, you didn't win the game of capitalism. You lost the game of life. You effectively went to work every day for decades, traded your limited time for dollars, and then donated those years of your life to the bank or the taxman for free. Today, I want to show you the math behind the die with zero philosophy. We are going to sketch a specific graph called the utility of money curve. It proves why saving too much is actually a mathematically irrational waste of your life energy. I see this constantly. People get stuck in what I call accumulation autopilot. You spend your 20s and 30s grinding to build a nest egg. You spend your 40s and 50s maximizing that number because you are scared of the future. Then you hit your 60s and you have the money, but you do not have the knees for the trekking trip you planned 20 years ago. The central argument we are exploring today comes from Bill Perkins. He argues that most savers overshoot the mark. They trade too much time and energy for money they will never get to use. The goal shouldn't be to maximize your net worth at the moment of your death. The goal should be to maximize your lifetime fulfillment. And those are two very different math problems. If you are new here, I'm Tom. I like looking at the psychology behind the numbers. If you enjoy deep dives that prioritize logic over hype, go ahead and subscribe. Now, I want you to treat the next 30 minutes as an investment. We are going to look at consumption smoothing and the economics of regret. By the end of this, I want you to be able to look at your savings account and tell me if that money is a security blanket or a monument to wasted time. Let's get into the first major concept, which is the lie we tell ourselves about the future. The biggest myth in retirement planning is the idea that your ability to enjoy money remains constant throughout your life. We build spreadsheets assuming that $1 at age 30 buys the same amount of happiness as $1 at age 85. But deep down, you know that isn't true. Money has utility. It is a tool to buy experiences, comfort, and security. But that utility is completely dependent on your physical body and your mental energy. If I gave you $1 million right now, you would probably book a flight, buy a house, or start a business. If I gave you that same $1 million when you were 95 and hooked up to machines in a hospital room, that money has almost zero utility to you. You cannot ski. You cannot travel. You might not even be able to eat a nice steak. Yet, traditional financial advice tells us to push all our gratification into that final window. I want you to visualize a simple graph. On the bottom axis, you have your age, from 20 all the way to 90. On the vertical axis, we have the utility, or satisfaction, you get from spending $1,000. In your 20s and 30s, that curve is high. You have energy, you have health, and you have curiosity. A trip to Europe with friends might be a 10 out of 10 experience. As you move into your 40s and 50s, the curve starts to slope downward. You have more responsibilities, maybe less free time, and physical nagging injuries start to creep in. By the time you hit 75 or 80, that curve drops off a cliff. That same trip to Europe might be a struggle. It might be a 3 out of 10 on the satisfaction scale because walking the cobblestone streets hurts your back. This downward sloping curve is a biological reality. The math problem is that our income usually goes up as we age, but our ability to convert that income into fun goes down. Here is the twist that catches people off guard. We are obsessed with compound interest in our portfolios. We love seeing the money grow. But there is another force compounding in the background, and that is the decay of your physical body. Every year you delay an experience to save money, the cost of that experience essentially goes up in terms of physical effort. Economists call this the diminishing marginal utility of consumption over time. When you are young, you are time rich but cash poor. When you are old, you are often cash rich but time poor and health poor. If you blindly follow the standard advice to save, 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 you are essentially taking resources from your peak utility years and shipping them to your lowest utility years. You are starving your 30-year-old self to overfeed your 80-year-old self. That is not efficient resource allocation. That is bad logistics. So what do we do with this curve? The protocol is to stop looking at your life as one big timeline and start seeing it as a series of closing windows. There are certain things you can only enjoy in specific decades. Backpacking through hostels is a 20-something activity. It is miserable at 40. Taking your kids to Disney is a 30 or 40-something activity. It doesn't work when they are 25. You need to map your spending to these windows. The die with zero approach says you should be spending more when the utility curve is high, even if that means saving a little less for the years when the curve is low. You have to accept that your 80-year-old self simply does not need as much money for fun as you think they do. They just need security. We will get to the security part because I know that is where the anxiety lives. Now you might be thinking, Tom, I'd rather have too much money at 80 than not enough. That sounds logical. It feels safe. But if you think the only risk in retirement is running out of cash, you are ignoring a much darker risk. There is a specific type of regret that hits people when they realise they have a full bank account and an empty life. And once that realisation hits, no amount of compound interest can fix it. Let's look at the trap of the ant and the grasshopper. We all know Aesop's fable. The grasshopper parties all summer and starves in the winter. The ant works all summer, saves everything, and survives the winter comfortably. We are culturally programmed to be the ant. We are taught that any consumption today is a threat to our safety tomorrow. But in modern finance, the ant has a problem. The ant often keeps working long after the winter is funded. The ant ends up dying with a massive stockpile of grain that he never ate. In economic terms, the ant was inefficient. He worked days he didn't need to work. He endured stress he didn't need to endure. If the goal of life is survival, the ant won. But if the goal of life is satisfaction, the ant failed just as hard as the grasshopper. He just failed in the other direction. Economists have a term for this. It is called welfare loss. It happens when resources are allocated inefficiently. If you graph consumption paths, you have the grasshopper who spends high early and crashes. That is bad. Then you have the oversaver, the ant, who consumes very little early on and has a giant spike of potential consumption available at death. That giant spike represents wasted potential. The optimal path is what economists call consumption smoothing. It means your lifestyle should stay relatively stable. You shouldn't live like a pauper at 30 to live like a king at 90. The math suggests you should borrow from your future self if you expect to be rich later, or save just enough to maintain your current standard of living, but not to drastically increase it when you are too old to enjoy it. The smooth curve is the only one that maximizes total lifetime happiness. The problem is that consumption smoothing feels dangerous. It goes against our survival instincts. This leads to what the FIRE community calls one more year syndrome. You hit your financial number, you have enough to cover your needs forever, but you keep working. You say, just one more year to be safe. Then another. Then another. This is psychological safety, not financial safety. You are using money to treat anxiety. The twist is that while you are working that extra year to add another 100,000 to the pile, you are losing a year of your prime health. You are trading a scarce resource, time, for an abundant resource, money. The market cannot give you that year back. No refund policy exists for your 40s. You have to realize that oversaving is effectively working for free. You are doing the labor, but someone else, usually your heirs, will get the consumption. To break out of the ant mindset, you need to calculate your survival number separately from your enjoyment number. This is your baseline: housing, food, healthcare. Once that is funded by a safe withdrawal rate, or annuities, every dollar above that is play money. It is utility money. The protocol is to look at your net worth and ask, if I died today, how many years of work are sitting in this account unused? If that number is high, you need to start spending down. Not recklessly, but deliberately. You need to give yourself permission to lower your savings rate or even spend principal. The goal is to land the plane safely on the runway, not to fly over the airport with a full tank of gas until you crash. Let's shift gears to a concept from the book Your Money or Your Life, which Perkins adopts heavily. Money is just stored life energy. You went into an office, you sat in meetings, you dealt with stress, and in exchange, they gave you credits. Those credits represent hours of your life. If you buy a car, you are trading those hours for transportation. If you buy a dinner, you are trading those hours for a meal. But if you die with those credits still in your account, the transaction is incomplete. You gave the hours, but you got nothing. The system got your labor, and the void got your reward. This is why die with zero is an efficiency philosophy, not a hedonistic one. It is about making sure you get a fair trade for your life energy. Perkins introduces a brilliant financial metaphor for experiences: memory dividends. When you have a great experience, like a honeymoon or a big family reunion, the joy doesn't end when the event ends. You replay that memory, you talk about it. It becomes part of who you are. That memory pays a dividend of happiness every time you recall it. The earlier you have the experience, the longer the compounding period for those memory dividends. If you take the trip at 30, you might enjoy the memory for 50 years. If you wait until 80 to take the trip, you only get a few years of dividends. Mathematically, early experiences have a higher present value than late experiences because of this long tail of memory yield. Delaying gratification too long destroys this compounding effect. We are praised for delaying gratification. It is the hallmark of a responsible adult. But there is a point where delayed gratification becomes cancelled gratification. If you delay the hike up Kilimanjaro from age 30 to age 60, you didn't just delay it, you likely cancelled it, because your body can't do it. Or it will be a fundamentally different, less enjoyable experience. The twist is that you cannot simply shift experiences around on the timeline like pieces on a chessboard. The experience changes as you age. The backpacking trip is fun when you are broke and 20. It is uncomfortable and annoying when you are 50 and used to luxury. You have to buy the experience when it fits the timeline of your life, not just when it fits the timeline of your wallet. Here is the practical exercise. I want you to draw a timeline of your life in 10-year buckets: 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. Now, list the key experiences you want to have. Don't just dump them all in the retirement bucket. Place them in the specific decade where they make the most sense physically and socially. Skiing with your kids? That has to happen before they leave for college. That goes in the 40s bucket. Hiking the Appalachian Trail? Maybe that's a 50s bucket item. Once you slot these in, you realize that you need to spend money on them in those specific windows. You cannot save that money for later. This creates a spending plan that aligns with your biology. It forces you to use your life energy while it is still fresh. This all sounds great in theory, but I know what the skeptic in you is screaming. Tom, what if I run out? What if I live to be 105? What if they invent a pill that makes me young again? These are valid fears, but here is the counterintuitive flip. The people who are most afraid of running out of money are usually the ones with the least statistical chance of doing so. The data on regret shows something fascinating. We assume everyone regrets saving too little. But when you survey the elderly, the regrets are almost never about the bank balance. They are about the time balance. Let's look at the evidence. We generally assume that the worst possible outcome is being old and broke. And to be clear, that is a terrible outcome. Poverty in old age is a nightmare. But we let that one nightmare scenario dictate 100% of our decision-making, even when we are nowhere near the poverty line. We optimize our entire lives to avoid a tail risk event. It's like wearing a spacesuit to the grocery store because there is a non-zero chance you might get abducted by aliens. It is a massive overcorrection. The fear of running out causes us to hoard assets that, statistically, we will never touch. In a recent NBER working paper using the Health and Retirement Study, researchers found something interesting. Yes, about half of older respondents expressed regret about not saving enough. But look closely at who they are. These are mostly people who had low incomes throughout their lives or suffered major shocks. When you look at middle and high earners, the people likely watching this video, the regret shifts. A survey of early retirees found that while some regretted not saving more for security, a massive chunk regretted staying in the workforce too long. They regretted missing the window for experiences. They realized that the extra $2 million didn't buy them $2 million worth of happiness at age 80. The utility of that money had collapsed. The data shows we are terrible at predicting what will actually make us happy in the future. This brings us to the two types of risk. There is financial risk, which is running out of money, and there is life risk, which is running out of time. Traditional financial advice focuses 100% on financial risk. It ignores life risk completely. But life risk is actually guaranteed. You are 100% guaranteed to run out of time eventually. Financial risk is just a probability. By focusing entirely on the money, you are maximizing your safety against the probable risk, while exposing yourself completely to the guaranteed risk. You are guaranteeing that you will waste life energy to insure against a financial scenario that might not even happen. The die with zero philosophy isn't about ignoring financial risk. It's about balancing it with life risk. The solution is to build a floor. You calculate the bare minimum you need to survive in old age: food, shelter, basic care. You secure that with guaranteed income sources like Social Security, pensions, or annuities. That covers your financial risk. Once the floor is secure, you can be much more aggressive with a surplus. The surplus is for living, not for hoarding. If you have a pension that covers your rent and food, why are you sitting on $1 million of stocks at age 80? That money is serving no purpose. You should have spent it in your 50s and 60s, when it could have bought you memory dividends. Secure the floor, then spend the ceiling. This is usually the part where parents get angry. They say, "Tom, I'm not saving for me. I'm saving to leave a legacy for my children. I want to die with millions so they can be set for life." That is a noble instinct, but again, we have to look at the math of utility. Leaving a giant inheritance at the moment of your death is actually one of the most inefficient ways to help your children. Think about the timeline. If you live to be 85 or 90, how old will your kids be? They will be in their 60s. They will likely be retiring themselves. The utility curve applies to your kids too. $1 given to your child when they are 30 is worth infinitely more than $1 given to them when they are 60. At 30, they are buying a house, starting a business, or raising your grandchildren. They need the capital now. The marginal utility of that money is huge. At 60, the house is paid off, the kids are gone, and their career is winding down. Dumping $1 million on them at age 60 is nice, but it doesn't change the trajectory of their life the way it would have 30 years earlier. By waiting until you die to give them the money, you are hoarding the resources during the decades where they could have had the biggest impact. There is a saying in estate planning: giving with a warm hand is better than giving with a cold hand. If you give while you are alive, you get to see the joy it brings. You get to see them buy the house. You get to see them start the business. You get the memory dividend of your generosity. If you wait until the cold hand of death distributes your assets, you get zero utility from that giving. You are dead, and your kids get the money too late. Die with zero doesn't mean spend it all on yourself. It means distribute your assets before you die. If you have enough for your floor, give the rest to your kids now. Don't make them wait for your funeral to get a leg up in life. The protocol here is intentionality. Decide exactly how much you want to give your kids. Is it 50k? 500k? Pick a number. Now, decide when that money would be most useful to them. Maybe it's at age 28 for a wedding. Maybe at 32 for a down payment. Separate that money from your stash and give it to them at that age. Do not let it sit in your account, compounding until you are 90, just because you want a high score. By giving it early, you are optimizing the utility of your family's total wealth. You are putting the fuel in the car when the race is happening, not after the car is parked in the garage. We are coming in for a landing, but there is one final thing we have to confront. It's the uncomfortable truth that makes all of this math work. You do not know your expiration date. You could do everything right, eat the kale, run the miles, save the money, and still not make it to the drawdown phase. This isn't morbid, it's statistical. And it is the strongest argument for why you need to stop waiting. So, how do we pull this all together? You need a glide path. In aviation, a glide path is the controlled descent of an aeroplane to the runway. If you stay too high for too long, you overshoot the runway and crash. If you drop too fast, you crash short. Most savers are currently flying way too high. They are gaining altitude when they should be starting their descent. The goal is to time your consumption so that your net worth peaks around age 50 or 60, and then deliberately declines. Yes, declines. That is a scary word for investors. But a declining net worth in retirement is a sign that you are actually using your life energy. To do this, you need to switch your metric. Stop tracking net worth as your primary KPI. Start tracking net fulfillment. Look at your graphs. If your money line is going up and to the right, but your experiences line is flatlining, you are failing. You need to start decumulating. That might mean buying the annuity to secure the floor. It might mean booking the big trip now. It might mean writing the check to your kids today. The math says that every dollar you die with is a dollar that failed to fulfill its potential. It is energy that was generated but never released. Oversaving is when your net worth graph looks amazing and your life satisfaction graph looks empty. We are trained to send every spare dollar to our 85-year-old self, ignoring the needs of our 30, 40, and 50-year-old selves. The die with zero philosophy is simply the recognition that money has no utility when you are dead, and significantly less utility when you are very old. A rational, math-driven plan secures your floor, and then ruthlessly pushes resources into the years where they buy the most life. Don't be the richest person in the graveyard. Be the person who squeezed every drop of joy out of the lemon before the time ran out. I want to hear from you in the comments. Are you an ant or a grasshopper? And if you are an ant, what is the one experience you are putting off because you are worried about the number on the screen? Let's get a peer review going down there. If this perspective shifted something for you, hit the like button so the algorithm knows we care about life, not just portfolios. I'll see you in the next one.